How's it going, guys? Tyler here. Going to be reviewing a new knife for you guys, the collaborative design between Liong Mah and Reate, the SDC. Starting off with the packaging, you get a nice little zipper pouch, just like some of the other Reate designs, like the Horizon that I have came in a pouch very much like this, except with a different logo. Inside, obviously you get a knife, but you get one of Liong's business cards, so to speak, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But anyways, on the flip side, you get some of his contact info, which kind of brings up the question for me if he's going to be doing some of the warranty service stateside. I noticed that the Steelcraft knife, the mini bodega, came with Beg's info. Neither came with anything regarding to Reate. It was more about the designer. So I don't know if we are still forced to send our knives to China for any warranty service, or if the designers themselves are going to be doing any of that. So anyways, onto the knife. Here you have the new SDC, the Slim Daily Carry. And as the name suggests, that's exactly what this knife is. It is not a tactical flipper. It is not a gentleman's knife. It is just a very slim and very streamlined design. And very much like other Liong designs, like the Remedy or the Tempest, I really like the clean lines that he incorporates into his design. It's very, very unique to me. I'm not someone that's really into the overly tactical looking designs, but I don't know, I kind of enjoy some of them, but I also really appreciate a clean line design very much like this. So, starting out with the profile, you can see that the handle is very similar to, I wouldn't say similar to a Spenza, but the profile itself is similar to a Spenza in width. So pulling out the calipers, you can see that starting from the butt end of the SDC and working my way up, you start about a little under an inch, and then you start working your way up to over an inch. Going up to the finger choil, you get about, a little over an inch. So for the most part, it's a slimmer knife in my opinion. It is not a tiny little knife, but it's not a very wide knife either. So looking at the Spenza, you could see that the SDC maxed out at about 1.17, I believe that was, but don't quote me. Can't remember. But the Spenza, starting at the end, is a little over an inch as well, and it kind of tapers down towards the middle part of the knife. And at the widest point of the Spenza, you get to about let's see, I think it's about almost an inch and a quarter at some parts. So handle is I wouldn't say similar, but they carry very similar in my opinion. I've been carrying the SDC for about a day now, just doing some just typical everyday stuff with it, cutting cardboard and things like that. But I think they ride very similarly. The SDC is a lot heavier than the Spenza. I haven't weighed them, but just by feel alone, that does feel a lot heavier. But like I said, the pocket's very similar in my opinion. So, comparing this one to something like the Horizon C, you can see that the Horizon has much more dramatic lines and has more of a tactical look, especially in the handle of the knife. Not only do you have some of these dramatic lines on the Horizon, and very much like other Reate designs, you have more dramatic lines and curvatures that are incorporated into the design. This one has the fuller on there, but this one is plain, I guess you would call it, compared to something like the Horizon C that I just showed. This one is very a clean line design. I really like this one. Now I know one thing that everybody's wondering about is how this flipper tab works, since it is very low profile, and appears that this wouldn't give you a lot of purchase on the flipping action of the knife, but I gotta say it flips very well. I've had no problems with it. The point of purchase is very high up on the axial point of the pivot, so you're pretty much limited to what would you call it, light switch flipping method. You can't really do a push button on this one because you do not get the leverage that you would like you would on the Horizon C. This one you can very much push button the flipper tab, or you could as well light switch it too. But on the SDC you are very much limited to a light switch method of opening, which I like. Either way is fine, and what also helps as well is the jimping on the flipper tab, which is something I was very happy to see on this knife. If I can focus. But one thing I found interesting is that the lock interface where this tang would meet the steel lock bar insert, you can see that they kind of ground off some of the jimping. Might be a little hard to see, but nonetheless it is still there, and it kind of bothers me a little bit, but when looking at the knife a little farther you can't really see how they would have avoided that, in my opinion. But nonetheless, it's more of an aesthetical issue. The grind itself, to me, is similar to in performance anyways, to a ZT-0562, although with a slightly slimmer profile and a more pointy tip. But performance-wise, I found that it performs pretty similar to this knife. The thickness on, I would say, these three knives, going by what I measured, the Horizon, the 0562, and the SDC, was all about 0.16 of an inch. So a little bit thicker, but I would not say it's a folding pry bar, as some would say. But for the most part, all three of these knives kind of, they cut similarly to some point. I found my daily uses today to be very similar among these three knives. Anyways, zooming in on the handle, you can see that there is a little bit of CNC marks or something. These little vertical, I don't know, these angular striations you see along the handle. I don't know how I feel about them. I kind of like them, I kind of don't. I'm not sure. They add a little bit of aesthetical appeal, but I kind of would have liked a little bit of just more of a smoother surface. You know, you don't feel them really in hand at all. They do not add any texture or grip, to me anyways, but I don't know. It's something that's kind of grown on me a little bit, so nothing to worry about. The hardware is all titanium now, obviously excluding the blade and the steel lock bar insert. And I'm not sure about the pivot collar here, but it is all anodized a nice little bronzy color, which to me, I used to really like the anodized blue look like you would see on this Horizon C, but lately I'm more into this goldish bronzes color. It more kind of adds a distressed look to the knife, so to speak, to me. But I like this one. I like it's a nice little accent that they added on there. It really pops out to me. Inside the knife, you can see there is very deep skeletonizing, very much like a. If you saw the review of the mini bodega I did, you could see it. You might remember that I talked about there was some very deep skeletonizing done on there, and on this one you can see that as well, that the skeletonizing is very deep on there, and I'm sure it really took a lot of weight off this design since it is a little bit of a thicker handle design, more so in the scales, not overall. And you get these little numbers in there, which I'm sure do something for the assembly of the knife. But anyways, very nicely skeletonized and very cleanly done. The ergonomics of the knife is something I was a little worried about, being that the edge seems a little far away for my liking in your primary grip between the front of where your finger ends to where the edge starts at. Now comparing it to something like the Sebenza is a lot closer to the front of your finger than the SDC is, so I was a little worried that I would go to make a cut and I wouldn't find myself hitting the edge, but under use today I found that that was really not a problem. It ended up working very well actually. So back to the blade, I believe this is what appears to be a hollow grind, and like I said, it cuts very similar to like a ZT or something like that. You don't get the thin edge geometry that you would on like an Opendel or something. Obviously this is a much beefier design, but it's very useful. It's not too thick or anything like that, but I will say that the edge that mine came with was a little obtuse for my liking, and I'm going to have to reprofile this a little bit to be a little thinner behind the edge and slice a little better in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the factory edge that this one came with. Not a big deal though, nothing unfixable. So overall it's a very great knife. The pocket clip, you get a 3D machined pocket clip on there, which pockets very well. It adds a nice bit of retention to your pocket, and it pulls in and out very nicely. I really like it, and I like how they kind of left the pocket clip kind of to the front area of where you would draw it. It really comes in and out of the pocket very nicely, and I like how they kind of contoured everything to kind of match the design of the handle, or the profile so to speak. One thing I notice is this little corner right here tends to poke into your hand a little bit when you are, you know, getting a full grip on there. This point right here, when you go to make a tight grip on the knife in the primary position, it tends to dig in a little bit, but honestly it's not that bad. And if it was really bad, if it started to bother me a little bit, you can always just choke up on the knife, and that almost becomes a non-issue because your hand is nowhere near that point anymore. One thing I also found was interesting was the way they did the jimping on this knife, which may be hard to see in here, but it's more of something you need to notice in person. But it almost has a saw blade effect, where the backside of the jimping is kind of, it is kind of angled more towards the back. So when you're going to hold the knife and you are pushing forward like you would on a forceful cut, it tends to add more traction to your thumb versus, you know, when you slide your finger down, you feel just a nice rounded jimping, but when you're pushing up, it really grabs your fingers a lot better. Now that is only for the spine jimping, and it is not for the choil jimping. But nonetheless, I like the jimping on here. Even though it is a very thick and bold jimping, it really adds a lot of traction to your hands. And ergonomic wise, this thing feels great, other than the hot spot that I noticed on there and the you know, everything else. It really feels great in the hand. It you know, it makes for a nice comfortable feel, and especially when choking up, it allows a lot of control over, you know, finer cutting. You can get multiple grips on this knife, and that is one thing I've come to appreciate is, you know, like I mentioned before on how far the blade was up from the primary grip. When you choke up, it really gives you a lot of free space for your finger to move around, versus some choils, they kind of end right where your finger would sit at, versus this one gives you a little bit more space to work with when you're doing some finer cuts. You know, multiple grips. It allows you to hold it in multiple grips and still maintain a comfortable position. So all in all, I really like this knife. The first day I had it, I really had to, I don't know, I was kind of unsure about it at first, but now that I've carried it, I actually really like this design. I think I'll be carrying it a lot more than I had anticipated, and overall, I would give it a nice solid B+. To be honest, you know, for the price point, I really don't think you could do much better, and it's a very unique design. Obviously, the main focus point is the hidden flipper tab on there, how it just kind of integrates itself to become a finger choil. I found that very interesting, and I really like that. To me, it almost gives off like a Nirvana-ish feel, which this would be a really cool design, in my opinion, to be an integral folder. I would love this to be an integral, and for some reason, I would honestly pay another 100 or 200, maybe even 250 to make this an integral folder. I would definitely pay that. So if Reate or Liong Mah is watching this, take note. I would love to see an integral from you guys. That would be amazing. But all in all, a great folder for a great price. Snag yours now, and I think you'll be impressed. It's a great knife. A little funny story is that Knife Center actually has these listed as the Slim Dirty Carry versus the Slim Daily Carry is what it's actually called. And last Friday is when I first discovered this knife, when I first heard that it was released, when actually it was released much sooner. I found out about it. I've been calling it the Slim Dirty Carry, and I thought it was actually some kind of reference to the movie Dirty Harry. So kind of got to laugh at myself about that, as somebody on the forum corrected me on the correct name of this knife. So all in all, I would highly recommend this knife. For the price point, like I said, you really can't do much better. Alright, that's it. Enjoy, guys.